You have used an umbrella 100 times in your life, maybe 1,000, and you have probably never once thought about it because it is one of the most boring objects a person can own. It just sits by your door, waiting for rain, doing one simple job. But here is something that might surprise you. For most of human history, the umbrella had nothing to do with rain at all. It was built to block the sun. And for almost 2,000 years after that, in one of the richest and most powerful countries on earth, it was seen as something only women should carry. A man caught holding one in public could be laughed right off the street. So, how did an object meant to shade rich people from sunlight turn into something almost every single person on the planet owns today? The story is longer, stranger, and a lot more stubborn than you would guess. And it starts with kings, not with rain. Let's go back more than 4,000 years to ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and China. In these early civilizations, the sun was not just uncomfortable, it was a symbol of power. If you were rich enough, you did not need to walk around in the heat like everyone else. You had someone else do it for you. Wealthy Egyptians had servants hold large fan-shaped shades over their heads, made from palm leaves or feathers. In Mesopotamia, stone carvings from around 1400 BC show kings walking under a shade held by an attendant, while ordinary people stood in the open sun behind them. In China, similar shades appear in art from a similar time period, and they were treated the same way, as a mark of status, not comfort. Notice what is missing here. Nobody was worried about rain. Getting wet was not the problem. Standing in the sun like a common laborer, that was the problem. If you had money and power, your skin stayed pale and shaded, because pale skin meant you did not have to work outside in the fields all day. The shade was basically a walking symbol that said, I do not need to suffer like you do. For centuries, this stayed a status symbol reserved for royalty and nobility. Ordinary people simply squinted through the sun and got on with their day. There was no such thing as a personal foldable umbrella you could carry around. These early sunshades were heavy, awkward, and needed someone else to hold them for you. If you were poor, you did not get one. Simple as that. Think about how strange this would look to us now. Imagine a modern head of state walking down the street with a personal assistant trailing behind, holding nothing but a shade over their head, just so their skin would not tan. Today, that would look almost comical, maybe even a little embarrassing. But 4,000 years ago, it was the exact opposite. It was a flex. It told everyone watching that this person was so far above ordinary labor that they did not even have to manage their own comfort. Now, here is where things get interesting. Somewhere in China, likely more than 2,000 years ago, someone made a small but massive change. They coated a paper or silk shade with wax or lacquer to make it waterproof. Suddenly, the same object that blocked sun could also block rain. This is the moment the umbrella, as we sort of recognize it today, was actually born not in Europe, but in China. Chinese records describe folding umbrellas being used by nobles as early as around 21 AD, and the design kept improving over the following centuries. Craftsmen figured out how to make the frame collapsible, using bamboo ribs that could snap open and close, very similar in idea to a modern umbrella, just built from completely different materials. From China, the design spread through Korea and into Japan, where it developed its own identity. In Japan, it became known as the wagasa, made from bamboo and washi paper, and it split into different types depending on who used it and why. Some were built for rain, some purely for shade, some were used in tea ceremonies, and some became fashion pieces carried by performers and geisha. The umbrella in East Asia was not one single object anymore. It had branched into a whole family of tools, each one built for a specific job. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, ancient Greece and Rome had their own version of the sunshade too, most likely influenced by trade contact, stretching back toward Persia and India. Greek pottery from as far back as the 6th century BC shows women being shaded by servants holding a portable canopy. Roman women used something similar. And there is some evidence Roman men occasionally used shades at the theater or in the arena to block the sun during long events, But once the Roman Empire collapsed, a lot of this knowledge and habit simply faded out of Western Europe. For roughly 1,000 years, through most of the medieval period, the umbrella basically disappears from European life. People just got wet. People just got sunburned. Nobody thought much of it. The umbrella's European comeback starts in Italy around the 1500s and 1600s, mostly connected to the Catholic Church. Large ceremonial umbrellas, called umbraculum, were used to shelter the Pope and high-ranking clergy during outdoor processions. This is actually where the English word umbrella comes from. It comes from the Italian word umbrello, which comes from the Latin word umbra, meaning shade. The whole point of the word, from the very beginning, was shade, not rain. From Italy, the fashion for carrying a personal shade spread into France, and French nobility picked it up as a symbol of elegance. Wealthy women started carrying small folding sun parasols as an accessory, something to protect pale skin and complete an outfit, the same way a fine hat or gloves might. Once again, this had almost nothing to do with keeping dry. It was about looking refined and wealthy while walking outdoors. And this created a strange problem when the umbrella eventually crossed the English Channel into Britain, because in England, the weather is not exactly famous for sunshine. It is famous for rain, constant, unpredictable, thoroughly annoying rain. So when the umbrella showed up in London, society in the late 1600s and early 1700s, it slowly started shifting jobs, from blocking sun to blocking rain. But there was a catch. In Britain at this time, using an umbrella was considered something only women did. It was tied to French fashion, to delicacy, to being pampered. A real British gentleman, the thinking went, did not need to hide from a little rain. Real men rode in carriages, or they simply got wet and did not complain about it. Carrying an umbrella as a man was seen as weak, foreign, and a little ridiculous. This is where one very stubborn man enters the story, and honestly, he might be the most important person in this entire history. His name was Jonas Hanway, an English traveler, writer, and philanthropist, and around the 1750s, he decided he did not care what anyone thought. He started carrying an umbrella through the streets of London every single day, rain or shine. People stared. People laughed. Coachmen, in particular, hated him for it because carriage drivers made their money off people who did not want to walk through the rain. If pedestrians started carrying their own personal rain shelter, why would they ever pay for a ride? Some coachmen reportedly went out of their way to splash Hanway with their carriages as they passed just to mock him for carrying the thing in the first place. But Hanway kept doing it anyway, year after year, and slowly something shifted. Other men started noticing that he showed up to meetings dry, while everyone else was soaked. Practical won out over pride. Bit by bit, other British men started quietly picking up umbrellas of their own. And by the time Hanway died in 1786, carrying an umbrella in London had gone from being a joke to being completely normal for men too. Some historians even say umbrellas started being nicknamed Hanways in his honor for a while, a small tribute to the man who simply refused to be embarrassed. Even after Hanway's stubbornness paid off, umbrellas in the 1700s and early 1800s were still clunky, heavy things. The frames were usually made from whalebone or wood, and the covering was oiled canvas or waxed cotton, which was thick, stiff, and honestly not that great at repelling water once it got worn down. Carrying one around all day was genuinely a workout. It is worth pausing on just how long that stigma actually lasted, because it did not disappear overnight. Even decades after Hanway's death, some London gentlemen still avoided umbrellas just to prove they were tough enough to handle a British storm without help. Newspapers of the time sometimes poked fun at umbrella men, the same way people today might tease someone for overdressing on a mild day. It took nearly a full generation before nobody thought twice about a man walking into a bank or a courtroom with a dripping umbrella in his hand. What finally settled the argument, more than anything else, was plain practicality. Businessmen who showed up to meetings dry and calm simply looked more put together than the ones who arrived soaked through their coats. In a city built on commerce and appearances, staying dry started to matter more than any old idea about toughness. The next big leap came from a man named Samuel Fox, an English businessman around 1852. Fox owned a wire manufacturing company, and the story goes that he was sitting at breakfast one morning, annoyed at a broken umbrella with a snapped whalebone rib. Looking down at his table, he noticed the steel stays from a corset sitting nearby and had a simple idea. What if umbrella ribs were made out of thin, strong steel instead of heavy whalebone or wood? He patented a steel-ribbed umbrella frame that was lighter, stronger, and could fold up much smaller than anything before it. This single change is honestly the moment the umbrella turned into the object you would actually recognize today. Light enough to carry without effort, sturdy enough to survive real wind and rain, and small enough to fold down and tuck under your arm. Fox's steel frame design became the standard, and variations of it are still basically what modern umbrellas use. Around this same period, the umbrella also finished its journey from being an item people avoided to being a symbol of respectable British life. By the mid to late 1800s, a black umbrella tucked under the arm of a man in a suit had become almost a uniform, the kind of image now permanently linked with London businessmen walking to work in bowler hats. The very object Jonas Hanway got mocked for carrying had become the ultimate symbol of proper British style. As factories and mass production spread through the Industrial Revolution, umbrellas stopped being expensive handmade items only wealthy people could afford. They became cheap enough for ordinary working families to own. What started thousands of years earlier as a servant holding a shade over a king had turned into something a shopkeeper or a factory worker could pick up for a small price and carry to work on a rainy Tuesday. The 20th century brought a wave of small but clever improvements. In the 1920s, German inventor Hans Haupt created the first folding pocket umbrella, small enough to fit inside a coat or bag, which completely changed how people traveled with one. Instead of a long cane-style umbrella you had to carry the whole time, you could now stuff a compact umbrella into your bag and forget about it until you actually needed it. Materials kept improving too. Nylon and later various synthetic fabrics replaced heavier cotton canvas, making umbrellas lighter and far better at actually keeping water out. Aluminum and fiberglass ribs replaced steel in a lot of designs, cutting the weight down even more and making umbrellas more flexible so they could bend in strong wind instead of snapping. And then, in the 1960s, came another shift, this time from a Chicago businessman named Bradford Phillips, who developed the compact telescoping umbrella, the kind that collapses down into a small tube shape you can toss in a bag or a car door. This is the design most people picture today when they think travel umbrella, small, light, and almost disposable if you lose it or leave it behind on a train. There have been a few more twists, even in recent decades. In the early 2000s, a British engineer named Gerald Kessler, running a small umbrella company that had been struggling for years, decided the industry had not actually improved the core design in over a century. He and his team studied how race car wings handle airflow and applied that thinking to umbrella canopies, building a shape that lets wind pass through it instead of catching it and flipping inside out. That company, Blunt, became known for umbrellas that could survive real wind gusts without turning into a broken metal skeleton in your hand, something almost every umbrella owner has experienced at least once. Around the world today, the umbrella still carries very different meanings depending on where you are standing. In parts of Japan, traditional wagasa umbrellas are still handmade for tea ceremonies, weddings, and festivals, treated less like a rain tool and more like a piece of art passed between generations. In fashion, designer umbrellas have shown up on runways and in luxury stores as a genuine style accessory, not that far removed from the wealthy Europeans centuries ago who carried a parasol simply to be seen. And in film and music, the umbrella became a full-blown cultural symbol, from Gene Kelly swinging one around a lamppost in the rain in a classic movie musical to pop songs built entirely around the image of standing under one during a storm. So think about the full loop this object traveled. It began as a heavy shade held by a servant over an Egyptian king to block the sun and prove that he was too important to suffer in the heat like everyone else. It was reinvented in China with a coat of wax to block rain, spread into a whole family of styles across Japan and Korea. Faded almost completely out of Europe for 1,000 years, came back through the Catholic Church, got tangled up with French. Fashion was mocked as feminine in Britain, was rescued by one incredibly stubborn man who let himself get laughed at for years, was made light and strong with a corset-inspired steel frame, and finally shrank down into the little folding tube that lives in the bottom of your bag right now. Today, the umbrella industry is worth billions of dollars worldwide, and it is one of those rare inventions that basically every culture on Earth ended up adopting in some form, whether for sun, for rain, or at a beach or a restaurant table, sometimes for neither at all. It is one of the least glamorous objects you own, and also one of the oldest ideas still being used by humans, almost exactly the way it was thousands of years ago. Hold something over your head and stay a little more comfortable than the sky wants you to be. Next time it starts raining and you pop open that little folding umbrella without even thinking about it, remember that you are holding a 4,000-year-old idea about kings, a Chinese invention involving wax and bamboo, a French fashion trend, and one very stubborn Englishman who got mocked in the street for years just so you would not get rained on. If you learned something new today, drop a comment and tell us which part of the story surprised you the most. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one, and smash that like button before you go.